Go hide in storage. We're dealing with serious people. My sister, Lorraine Whitaker, didn't bother lowering her voice. She leaned in close, perfume sharp, smile thin. You'll only make this harder. I scanned the executive conference floor of Whitaker Industrial Supply, the manufacturing company my grandfather founded in 1968 with 2 welding torches and a risky bank loan. Investors were arriving. Tailored suits, leather portfolios, shoes too clean for factory floors. My father, Malcolm Whitaker, adjusted his cufflinks without meeting my eyes. Just for today, he murmured. Let your sister handle it. I've heard that since I was 22. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. I'm 36 years old, MBA from Northwestern, former restructuring consultant, the only sibling who studied our debt structure instead of posing beside machinery for press photos. But inside this building, I was overly cautious, too numbers-focused, not polished enough for investors, meaning I challenged assumptions. Lorraine preferred admiration. The storage room smelled like paper dust and cold steel shelving. I stepped inside without protest and left the door slightly ajar. Through the narrow opening, I watched the long conference table fill. Then, Lorraine's executive assistant rushed in, breath tight. "Miss Whitaker?" he whispered urgently. "The CEO of Sterling Enterprises just arrived." The air shifted. My father straightened instantly, Lorraine's confidence recalibrated into anticipation. I allowed myself the smallest smile. Because the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, she hadn't just arrived, she had been positioned all along. Through the narrow opening of the storage door, I watched my sister Lorraine transform. Her posture sharpened, her voice lowered into that polished tone she only uses around capital. "Gentlemen," she said smoothly, "we're honored you're here." My father, Malcolm Whitaker, stood beside her like tradition itself, silver hair, steady hands, inherited authority. Whitaker Industrial Supply has been in our family for 55 years. Steel fittings, structural components, government contracts, conservative growth, predictable margins, reliable, safe, outdated. What neither of them understood was this: safe companies survive, strategic companies evolve. 5 years ago, when I proposed shifting part of our distribution into automated logistics software and predictive supply analytics, Lorraine called it expensive nonsense. My father said, "We sell metal, not code." So I stopped pitching and started building. Sterling Enterprises didn't appear overnight. It was formed quietly, incorporated in Delaware, funded privately, structured cleanly. Not flashy, not loud, just precise. While Lorraine focused on quarterly presentations and local business awards, I built something upstream. Sterling doesn't compete with manufacturers. It owns the debt instruments that finance them. It restructures supply lines. It acquires distressed distribution channels. And, most importantly, it controls lending access for mid-size industrial firms seeking expansion capital, including ours. I watched as the conference room door opened. A man in a navy suit stepped inside first, Sterling's legal counsel, then 2 board advisors. Lorraine's smile widened. She expected negotiation. She didn't expect leverage. My father extended his hand confidently. He still believed this meeting was about partnership. It wasn't. It was about dependency. And in a few minutes, they were going to learn exactly who they had sent to storage. Lorraine began the presentation without hesitation. Slides lit up the screen, expansion into 2 new states, upgraded machinery, projected revenue growth. Whitaker Industrial is positioned for modern scaling, my sister Lorraine declared confidently, with the right capital infusion. Capital infusion. My father, Malcolm Whitaker, nodded along as if the money were already approved. What they were asking for was a $40 million credit facility. Expansion requires leverage. Leverage requires approval. Sterling Enterprises doesn't manufacture steel. It evaluates risk. I stepped out of the storage room before Lorraine reached the final slide. No dramatic entrance, just controlled steps across polished flooring. Conversations stalled. My father's eyebrows tightened. Lorraine's expression hardened instantly. "What are you doing?" she whispered sharply. I didn't answer her. Instead, I addressed Sterling's legal counsel directly. Before terms are discussed, I said evenly, we should clarify current covenant exposure. Lorraine blinked. Covenant exposure? She hadn't read the draft lending terms carefully. I knew that because I wrote them. Sterling's counsel adjusted his glasses. Whitaker Industrial's existing debt ratio violates expansion thresholds unless corrective restructuring occurs. My father, Malcolm, stiffened. That wasn't mentioned. It was, I replied calmly, in the revised addendum. Lorraine's confidence faltered for the first time. You're not part of this discussion, she snapped sharply. I met her gaze. I am this discussion. And that was the moment the room realized something had shifted. Not emotionally, financially. My sister Lorraine tried to recover quickly. There seems to be a misunderstanding, she said, forcing a smile. We can renegotiate. Sterling's counsel didn't smile back. There is no misunderstanding, he replied calmly. Section 8.4 clearly outlines voting control triggers in the event of covenant breach. My father, Malcolm, turned toward the screen. Voting control? Yes, that part. When Whitaker Industrial refinanced 2 years ago to stabilize cash flow after supply chain losses, they signed a structured note agreement. They skimmed it. I didn't. That note was quietly acquired 6 months later by Sterling Enterprises. Not aggressively, not publicly, just transferred. Debt isn't loud when it changes hands. It's precise. If expansion proceeds under current metrics, counsel continued, temporary oversight authority shifts to the principal debt holder. Lorraine's voice thinned. And who is that exactly? I let the silence stretch one beat too long. Then I answered, Sterling Enterprises. My father, Malcolm, looked confused. We're sitting with Sterling. Yes, I said evenly, but I own controlling interest in Sterling. No gasp, no dramatic music, just the sound of air leaving a room. Lorraine stared at me as if recalculating everything she believed. You don't, she said weakly. I do, I replied, legally, structurally, entirely. This wasn't a surprise takeover. It was contractual gravity. They didn't lose control today. They shifted it the moment they dismissed the person who read the fine print, and the real decision hadn't even been presented yet. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Not because they were shocked, because they were calculating. My father, Malcolm Whitaker, finally found his voice. You structured this deliberately. Yes, I answered. Not cruelly, not apologetically, factually. My sister Lorraine's composure cracked first. You set us up. No, I corrected her. I positioned myself. There's a difference. Sterling didn't sabotage Whitaker Industrial. Whitaker Industrial overextended without reading its obligations. I simply acquired the obligation. Sterling's counsel slid a revised proposal across the table. Option 1, he said calmly. Sterling assumes temporary operational oversight under covenant enforcement. That meant I step in, I restructure, I modernize. Option 2, he continued, Whitaker declines expansion and restructures privately under stricter repayment terms. That meant shrink, delay growth, preserve pride. My father looked at me differently now, not as the younger daughter, as the decision-maker. You'd take control, he said quietly. Temporarily, I replied, to stabilize and reposition. Lorraine's jaw tightened. And after that? That depends on performance. The room understood what that meant. Authority isn't removed with noise. It transfers through competence. My father exhaled slowly. Why didn't you just tell us? I met his eyes. I did, 5 years ago. This wasn't revenge. It was overdue alignment. And the final move was entirely theirs. The board was called in within the hour. 5 members, all seasoned, all cautious, all aware that expansion without capital would stall Whitaker Industrial for years. My sister Lorraine tried one final angle. This is emotional retaliation disguised as finance. No one echoed her. because numbers don't carry emotion, they carry consequence. Sterling's counsel outlined exposure plainly: breached ratios, tightening supplier credit, aging infrastructure, shrinking margins. Then he stepped back. The decision rested with Whitaker Industrial's board. My father, Malcolm Whitaker, didn't speak first. That mattered. For decades, his voice ended discussions. Today, he waited. Board member Hayes cleared his throat. If Sterling assumes oversight, what changes immediately? I answered before counsel could. Debt renegotiation within 90 days, digital distribution integration, automation investment phased over 18 months, margin recovery projected at 14% year 2. Clear, specific, executable. Lorraine stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language, because I had been studying this company while she was managing perception. The vote was taken quietly. 4 in favor, 1 abstained. Oversight transferred, not permanently, conditionally. My father looked at me again, this time not confused, not threatened, assessing. "You'll report quarterly," he said. "Of course," I replied. Lorraine stood abruptly. "You think this makes you powerful?" I held her gaze. "No," I said calmly. "It makes the company stable." And for the first time in this building, my words carried more weight than hers. I didn't go to the executive office. I went to the factory floor. Steel sparks cut through the air, hydraulic presses thudded. Men and women who had worked here 20, 30 years barely glanced up. They weren't interested in boardroom politics. They were interested in paychecks. My father, Malcolm Whitaker, followed at a distance, not to supervise, to observe. I gathered the shift leads near the loading bay. "My name is Eleanor Whitaker," I said evenly. "You already know that. What you don't know is that Sterling Enterprises will be restructuring capital flow and supply contracts effective immediately." Blank looks. So I translated. "No layoffs, no pension cuts. We're modernizing equipment and securing long-term contracts. That protects you." Now they listened. One machinist folded his arms. "And what does that cost us?" "Short-term adjustments, longer-term stability." I didn't promise miracles. I promised math. Back upstairs, Lorraine watched through the glass walls of the conference wing. She wasn't excluded, but she wasn't centered. That shift unsettled her more than losing a vote. Later, she cornered me near the elevators. "You enjoyed that," she said. "No," I replied. "I prepared for it." She studied me carefully. "For years." Yes, because this was never about humiliating her. It was about preventing decline. And in 6 months, the numbers would speak louder than either of us ever could. 6 months doesn't sound long. In manufacturing, it's enough to reveal competence. Supplier contracts were renegotiated within 90 days. Outdated freight brokers replaced with predictive routing software. Inventory waste cut by 12%. Not flashy changes, effective ones. Quarterly numbers reflected it. Revenue up 9%. Operating margin recovered. Debt risk rating upgraded. The boardroom felt different now, quieter, more attentive. My father, Malcolm Whitaker, no longer introduced me as helping temporarily. He used the word oversight. Accurate. My sister, Lorraine, attended meetings, but she no longer led them. She watched, evaluated, recalculated. At the second quarterly review, board member Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Sterling's oversight has exceeded projections." That wasn't praise, it was acknowledgement. After the meeting, my father stopped me near the window overlooking the yard. "You misjudged me," he said. "Not dramatic, not emotional, just direct." "Yes," I replied. He nodded slowly. "You built something substantial." I didn't smile, because validation wasn't the goal, stability was. Lorraine approached us later, controlled but quieter than usual. "What happens when oversight period ends?" she asked. "Then we evaluate leadership based on results," I said. "Not inheritance, not tradition, results." For the first time in our lives, the hierarchy wasn't based on birth order, it was based on performance. And that reality unsettled her more than the storage room ever had. At the 12-month review, the numbers were undeniable. Revenue up 18%, new federal contracts secured, long-term supply agreements stabilized for 5 years. Whittaker Industrial wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. The oversight clause required a formal decision at the 1-year mark, return full operational control, or restructure leadership permanently. The board gathered again in the same room where my sister Lorraine once sent me to storage. No one mentioned it. They didn't need to. Board member Hayes spoke first. Performance metrics justify continuation of Sterling's oversight in an executive capacity. Translated, make it permanent. My father, Malcolm Whittaker, didn't interrupt. He looked at Lorraine, then at me. "This company carries our family name," he said carefully, "but it also carries hundreds of livelihoods." He turned to the board. "I move that operational leadership transition to Eleanor Whittaker, effective immediately." Lorraine inhaled sharply. The vote was unanimous. No theatrics, no applause, just signatures. Afterward, Lorraine stood across from me in the hallway. "You could have crushed me," she said quietly. "I didn't want to crush you. I wanted the company to survive." She studied me for a long moment. "You never left that storage room, did you?" I shook my head slightly. "No," I said. "I just outgrew it." And for the first time, she didn't argue. The name on the building didn't change. Whittaker Industrial Supply still stood in steel letters above the entrance. What changed was the tone inside. Meetings became shorter, decisions became data-driven, emotions stopped outranking preparation. My father, Malcolm Whittaker, moved into a chairman role, advisory, respected, no longer carrying operational strain. He adjusted well. Structure suits him. My sister Lorraine remained with the company, not demoted, not discarded. She shifted into client relations, where her polish finally had a productive outlet. We didn't become close, but we became professional, and that, for us, was progress. 6 months after the leadership transition, Sterling Enterprises formally merged its debt position into Whittaker Equity. Clean, transparent, strong. One afternoon, as I walked past the old storage room, I paused. The shelves were gone, the space converted into a digital monitoring hub, servers humming, screens displaying supply metrics in real time. Transformation doesn't arrive loudly. It installs itself quietly. I remembered Lorraine's words, "We're dealing with serious people." She was right. We were. She just misidentified who that was. Serious people read contracts. Serious people prepare years in advance. Serious people don't need to be announced. They position themselves. If you've ever been sent to the sidelines, told to wait, told to stay quiet, remember this: you don't need permission to build leverage. And when the door finally opens, you won't be arriving. You'll have been there all along. If this story reminded you that preparation beats posturing every single time, don't just scroll past it. Like this if you believe competence speaks louder than ego. Subscribe if you appreciate stories where strategy wins without shouting. And tell me, have you ever been underestimated and quietly positioned yourself anyway?